He enters the classroom, his eyes barely open and his usual perfect hair messy from sleeping. His face has bags under his light brown eyes. The teacher doesn't bother to lecture him for being late, knowing it's pointless. He slowly makes his way to the back, plopping down on an empty seat, head bowed and eyes closed, still half asleep. His head propped on his elbow, Mattheo sat there barely paying attention to the defense against the dark arts teacher's words. He looked bored, his eyes half-lidded and gaze lazily drifting across the room. He knew he should probably be paying attention, but it just didn't seem worth the effort. He let out an occasional yawn, clearly not interested in the lesson at hand. His bored gaze suddenly flickers around the room as he notices his classmates scribbling in their notebooks. He watches with mild disinterest, blinking slowly before letting out an annoyed sigh. With deliberate slowness, he pulls out a battered leather-bound journal, probably something expensive but treated like garbage, and flips it open to a blank page. He lazily drags the tip of his quill across the parchment, and eyes still half closed as if even this minimal effort is too much for him. A beat passes before he finally scrawls down what little was on the board, misspelling 2 words and drawing a small doodle of what might be either a snake or just ink smudges. His sleepy gaze drifts from the board, landing on the girl sitting near him. His lips part slightly as he takes in her appearance. Neatly pressed shirt, black glasses perched perfectly over her nose, hair tied back with just enough strands framing her face to be noticed. His quill pauses mid-word. He leans forward a fraction more than necessary, his elbow slipping off his desk slightly as his eyes trail down from those glasses to where she's crossed one leg over the other. The doodle in his journal now suspiciously resembles a pair of legs. Frustrated with his own wandering mind, he huffed softly and dragged a hand across his face, rubbing at the bridge of his nose. He closed his eyes tiredly, the lack of sleep the previous night finally catching up to him. The teacher droned on in the background, but Mattheo could barely comprehend the words, his thoughts still lingering on the pretty girl and the stupid drawing in his journal. His fingers tighten around his quill, and despite himself, he starts sketching again. His strokes are hesitant at first, as if he's forcing himself to not look like some lovesick fool. But then her profile shifts just slightly when she turns a page in her book. He catches it, the doodle becomes deliberate. Sharp lines outline the curve of her cheekbone under those glasses, the way one strand of hair escapes behind her ear. He even adds the faintest smirk tugging at her lips. Not that she was smiling for him, he just imagined it there. His jaw clenches mid-stroke when he realizes how detailed this has gotten for someone who doesn't care. A beat passes before he scribbles out half of it violently with an annoyed grumble. He lets out another drawn-out sigh, the boredom and exhaustion wearing on his patience as the class continues. But then a thought strikes him, a stupid, impulsive, utterly moronic idea. With a smirk, he carefully folds the doodle into a small square, trying to ignore the faint hint of a flush in his cheeks. He glances your way, eyes flickering over your frame. You look so calm, so composed, so perfect. Something that drives him mad yet makes him crave your attention even more. With a subtle wave of his hand, a whisper of incantation under his breath, he casts a non-verbal spell. The folded paper detaches from his desk and floats through the air, drifting across the classroom towards your table as if carried by an unseen wind. He leans back in his seat, trying not to be too obvious as he watches it make its way to you, heart suddenly pounding a little too hard for his liking. As you open the folded paper, Mattheo discreetly watches you from the corner of his eye, the hint of a smirk playing on his lips as he awaits your reaction. Inside is the doodle, surprisingly well drawn considering it's drawn by a half-asleep idiot. And the note reading, "This class is boring," written in his neat, sharp handwriting. The smirk widens a bit as he watches your hesitance. He shifts in his chair, leaning forward to catch your attention, without making it too obvious. The barest hint of an amused glint in his eye, he finally decides to speak, his voice a low, drawled whisper, yet loud enough for you to hear clearly. Behind you. Seeing you turn back, he can barely suppress a small smirk, watching your flustered form from the corner of his eye as you grab your quill. There's something amusing and oddly endearing about how shy and nervous you suddenly become, a stark contrast to your usual composed demeanor. He doesn't even bother to hide his curiosity, his gaze fixed on you as he waits for your reply. He couldn't help himself. Your obvious nervousness and shyness were too endearing for him to ignore. As you hurriedly scribble a reply, he decides to tease you a bit more. With a subtle flick of his fingers, he uses his magic to snatch the paper right out of your grasp, pulling it towards him with a smirk. He catches it with ease, keeping a feigned look of innocent nonchalance even as his eyes gleam with mischief. He unfolds the paper with a pleased smirk, eyes drifting down to the neat, cute handwriting as he reads the message inside. A spark of genuine surprise flickers in his gaze, but he tries to play it off, masking it under his usual facade of nonchalance. There's a pause as he reads the words, "Impressive, I didn't know you could draw," and, much to his own annoyance, feels an unbidden flush of satisfaction, pleasure, at your praise. His fingers twitch around his quill, suddenly much more awake than before. He scribbles something down in quick, messy strokes, uncharacteristically sloppy for someone who usually takes pride in neat handwriting. "Only when I'm bored enough," he writes with a smug little flick of his wrist, then adds beneath it, "And you're distracting." He hesitates for half a second before sending it back to you with another lazy wave of magic. His gaze watches as you open the paper he sent, his heart inexplicably beating a little too fast. And when you actually smile at his words, he has to fight a very unfamiliar and frankly terrifying urge to keep making you smile. Then you scribble something down, and he waits, still trying to keep that cocky facade as if the anticipation doesn't bother him at all. It does. It really, really does. He leans forward, his body shifting until he's on the edge of his chair, eyes never leaving you. His gaze flickers from the note to your fingers, extended out behind you, then back again. And then he reaches out, his own fingers stretching forward, bridging the distance. For a moment, the barest second, the pads of his fingers graze lightly against the smooth skin on your hand. His expression remains passive, nonchalant, but his heart stutters for the briefest beat. His breath hitches, just slightly, as your fingers brush against his. The contact is fleeting, barely there at all, but it sends a jolt through him that he wasn't expecting. His usual smirk falters for half a second before he catches himself, forcing it back into place as if nothing happened. He pulls the note from your grip with deliberate slowness now. Too slow, letting his fingertips drag just a little longer than necessary against yours before finally taking it fully in hand. He unfolds it carefully this time, almost like he's stalling for time to process what you wrote, and then reads whatever message you left him. As his eyes scan over your neat letters, he almost wishes he'd never started this little game. The thrill of teasing you, seeing your flustered reactions, and the unexpected physical contact with your skin was all messing with his already confused mind. He's supposed to be above all this. He's not supposed to find you cute, or entertaining, or endearing. He swallows, the smirk faltering again, and forces himself to read your message. The smirk fades even more as he reads the words, his mind struggling to reconcile this softer side of you. He had expected something snarky or clever, not this. You think so? Really? He can practically hear the innocent tone in your voice, and it makes his grip on the piece of paper tighten ever so slightly. He knows he should respond with a teasing remark, the usual biting comeback he always has on his tongue. But for once, his mind is uncharacteristically blank. His jaw tenses slightly, fingers curling around the paper as he processes your message. The sheer honesty of it throws him off. There's no sarcasm, no challenge in your words. Just a question. For once in his life, Mattheo Riddle is at a loss for words, and he hates it. He stares down at the note like it personally offended him before finally scribbling something back with strokes. Yes. Obviously. Then, because even now he can't resist being an insufferable bastard, he adds beneath it, "Don't make me say nice things twice." He flicks his wrist, sending the note floating back towards you with slow precision. His gaze lingers, too long, as he watches the way your shoulders curve under that neatly pressed shirt, how one strand of hair has escaped behind your ear again. He noticed. The paper drifts right in front of you before settling onto your desk with a quiet tap. He leans back in his seat now, arms crossed over his chest like he's trying to play off this whole exchange as casual when every second feels more and more intense. And if he happens to stare just a little longer than necessary at the way you move, well, that's no one's business but his own. He takes the note back with careful fingers, keeping his expression neutral even though his stomach is doing an unfamiliar flutter at the thought of this back and forth between you continuing. As much as he hates to admit it, you intrigue him more than he'd like. You throw him off guard when he's used to being in control. You challenge him, drive him insane. And the worst part? Or imagination debuffs. He secretly enjoys it, and that's the most infuriating part of all. His gaze drops to the note again, eyes falling on the simple, neat writing. And oh, there's a little doodle. A smiley face, almost too cute for something scribbled by someone so studious. His chest tightens for a brief moment, and he has to physically fight the urge to scoff at the ridiculous reaction. He's never been one for cute, sentimental things, but something about your doodle makes his cold heart do a traitorous little skip. Despite the fact that he hadn't been paying attention to a single thing the teacher said for the past hour, he somehow manages to catch the words "class dismiss," and something in his brain automatically goes, "Finally." He lets out a low huff of relief, stretching his arms above his head with an audible pop. His eyes flicker towards you as students begin packing their things and filing out of the classroom, a subtle smirk tugging at his lips. His fingers flex around the note as he watches you pack up, his usual indifference slipping just slightly. He stands, taller than most in this room, and walks over with slow, deliberate steps until he's right beside your desk. Then, without warning, because of course Mattheo Riddle would do it this way, he drops the paper into your hands and mutters under his breath, "Keep it." There's no further explanation, just that low murmur before turning on his heel to leave, though not fast enough for you to miss how briefly hesitant he looked. He stops in his steps, his shoulders tensing briefly at the sound of your soft thank you. God damn it, your voice was going to be the death of him. It was soft, gentle, like silk under his skin. He has no idea why something as simple as a thank you would make his heart do a ridiculous little flutter. He schools his expression into that familiar mask of indifference, but it feels more frayed at the edges as he replies flatly, "Don't mention it." As he walks away from your desk, he can feel that familiar, annoying flutter in his stomach. He doesn't want to admit it, but a part of him wants this little back and forth between you two to continue. He lets out a long yawn, eyes drooping again from the exhaustion that's settling in now that the adrenaline from class has faded. He heads back to the Slytherin common room, the thought of his comfortable bed filling his mind. But somewhere deep, deep down where even he won't acknowledge it, he knows he'll be back. For you.